returns to Part 1. Part 1.
You will hear a new student, Tom, talking to a student representative called Rachel about university clubs. You now have 30 seconds to read questions 1 to 4.
Now listen carefully and answer questions 1 to 4.
Hi, welcome to Freshers Week. I'm Rachel. Can I help you?
Oh, hi. Yes, I was hoping to find out about some clubs I could join.
Well, all the club stands are here in this hall. What were you interested in?
Not sure. I wanted to do something where I could meet people.
Well, take this leaflet with details of all the clubs and see what you think.
Oh.
It'll probably depend on what day you're free. Like on Mondays, there's the film club. Then on Tuesdays, you've got the climbing club. That's really good. I'm in that. Then on Wednesdays, you've got chess, if you want something a bit more intellectual. But you should look through carefully because all the clubs run extra activities as well as their normal meetings.
Oh, yes, I see. So it looks like the film club has discussions after the films. I'd quite like to go to those. Then climbing. Goodness. It says here that the university has its own climbing wall. That's impressive. And they go on weekend trips. Cool. And it says the chess club normally just does games with whoever turns up, but it also runs competitions sometimes. But I bet you've got to be pretty good to do that.
Yes, I think so.
And how many people are in the clubs? Are they all really full?
Well, obviously they're all different. So, for example, the film club has just increased its membership from 85 to 125. But I think they're hoping to extend it to 150. The climbing club's quite small, 40 people. And the chess club is fairly healthy at 55.
Right. Okay. So who do I see if I want to join these clubs?
Well, if you go round the stands and speak to the people there, for the film club, that's the events organiser. For climbing, you'll need the club secretary, and the chess club is organised by one of the maths tutors. Okay?
Yep. I think I'll start with the climbing club. It sounds good.
Oh, well, as I said, I'm in that, so I might be able to help you a bit.
You now have 30 seconds to read questions 5 to 10.
Now listen carefully and answer questions 5 to 10.
Okay. It says in the leaflet that they get together twice a month. Is that right?
Yes. Oh, you must join. It's really good fun. We go away quite a bit to North Wales. And every year we have a special excursion, usually to France, which is where we're going this year in the spring. The weather's too unpredictable in the autumn.
Wow, that sounds good. But it must cost a lot.
Yeah, but we try and save up for it through subscriptions. So rather than having a huge sum to pay in the month we go, we collect those weekly, so it spreads it out.
Good idea. I think I'll definitely join.
There are quite good benefits you get from joining. I mean, you need that, don't you? And the university clubs normally try and do deals with local businesses, so it's really worth joining. Like in the climbing club, they've got a special arrangement with one of the shops in town. So if you show your card, you can get money off equipment. Don't think the discount extends to clothes, though.
That's really worth it then. I'll go over and talk to them now.
OK, hope you do join. Oh, and another thing I meant to say. If you do become a member, you automatically receive a magazine once a year. It's quite useful and interesting because it goes out to all the national climbing clubs. And the other thing is, if you come to every session, then you can get a complimentary ticket to the big exhibition that's held in Cardiff every year. So, hope to see you.
Yeah, well, thanks a lot for your help.
That is the end of section 1. You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Now turns to Part 2. Part 2.
You will hear a talk about the history of a poetry award. You have 30 seconds to look at questions 11 to 15.
Now listen carefully and answer questions 11 to 15.
Hello everyone, and welcome to this year's award ceremony for the Antonia Watson Memorial Poetry Award. As with previous years, the competition has been particularly fierce and we received numerous excellent entries, so it's an incredible achievement for our 3 finalists who are sitting here amongst you, and we should congratulate them all. However, as with every competition, there can unfortunately only be one winner, and we will be announcing them shortly. Before we do, though, a few words about the award itself. As most of you know, the Antonia Watson Memorial Poetry Award has been presented annually since 2010 and was presented biannually for 2 more competitions prior, once in 2008 and once in 2006. It is entirely funded by Antonia Watson's very generous parents, who offer £1,500 to the author of the best poem on a topic announced at each previous award ceremony, as well as £500 to the first runner-up and £250 to the second, bringing the total up to £2,250. Now, a few words on Antonia Watson herself, without whom none of us would be standing here today. I briefly knew Antonia while at university, where we were flatmates for a year, and I'm afraid that any speech I give will not be able to do her justice, as she was the kindest, sweetest person I've ever met. Thankfully, this part of my speech was written with the assistance of one of her siblings, Thomas Watson, who was not only her brother, but also her best friend. Antonia was born in Slayford, Lincolnshire, in December 1986. From a very young age, she displayed an inquisitive and creative nature, matched in volume only by the gentle kindness of her spirit. She wrote her first poem, named Love Barks, about the death of her dog at the age of 10. This was also her first poem to be published at her school's newspaper, just 2 months after another of her poems, Be Kind, won the 1996 Triad Children's Writing Competition and was published in the competition's anthology. While her early forays into poetry were crowned with impressive success, Antonia unfortunately ceased to write for a few years following the death of her very dear grandfather, Peter William Watson, in 1999.
Now you have some time to look at questions 16 to 20. Now listen carefully and answer questions 16 to 20.
While her early forays into poetry were crowned with impressive success, Antonia unfortunately ceased to write for a few years following the death of her very dear grandfather, Peter William Watson, in 1999. Despite her writer's block, however, her artistic nature didn't lie dormant during the next 4 years. She had an active role in various theatre plays, and she also ventured into painting. A few of the plays are available on the internet, and you can find several of her self-portraits on our website, and you can see for yourself how impressive they are. But poetry, of course, remained her passion even then, which is why in 2003 she resumed writing, and her next poem, The War on Both Sides, was published in her college's journal. At the age of 18, Antonia moved to Sheffield to study English literature at the University of Sheffield. This is where she and I met, spending a whole year in adjacent rooms in a flat in central Sheffield. This is also where I met her good-natured, generous parents, Mr. and Mrs. Watson, who came to visit her regularly and always treated me like a daughter as well. Antonia and I grew very close during that period, and while we ran in different circles, we always found time for each other every week. Antonia self-published one collection of poems in August 2005. It was named Burning Stars, after the poem on page 16, which is also the date of her birthday. It was an immediate success amongst her peers at the University of Sheffield, and it was so cherished by her English literature classmates specifically that it had attracted the attention of one of her lecturers, who put her in touch with a literary agent. She had been due to begin working on her second collection right before her tragic passing in a car accident just 5 days before her 19th birthday in December 2005. Antonia was always interested in societal shifts and how they affect humanity as well as the environment, and this award was designed to reflect her faith that regardless of what we do, we are all inherently good. With this in mind, all of the topics this competition has dealt with have been about the potential and the positive side of humanity, such as this year's Young Love theme or last year's Inner Power theme. We've had poems about personal strength, about immigration, about gender equality and peaceful protest. And hopefully in 12 months, the poems we'll be awarding will be just as inspiring with the topic of poverty. I know Antonia would be really proud of what her parents and what all of you together have achieved. So, finally, let's get on with the actual award. As I said before, it's been a fierce competition this year, and with more than 5,000 entries, it was quite the task for our 3 judges to cut them down to just 3. But our 3 finalists definitely deserve to be here, and without further ado, I would like to...
That is the end of section 2. You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Now turns to Part 3. Part 3.
You'll hear a tutor and a student discussing transport. First, you have some time to look at questions 21 to 25. Now listen carefully and answer questions 21 to 25.
Come in, John, come in. How's the paper going?
Morning, Mr. Taylor. Pretty well, actually.
Good, good. It's not all about bicycles, is it? I know you've got a thing about bicycles.
Yes, but that's just...
There are other ways to get around town, you know.
Yes, I know. and I think I've researched pretty well all of them.
Right then. So your paper's about urban transport in London, eh?
Not just London, but that is going to be the focus. I've also looked at urban transport systems in cities around the world. Madrid, Beijing, Mexico City, Amsterdam, Paris, other countries too.
You have been busy, haven't you? What's the purpose of your study?
Well, two things really. I want to see if there are more efficient ways of organizing urban transport systems while cutting down on traffic congestion, and of course pollution, and to find ways of encouraging people to use public transport instead of their cars.
Let's start with that then, with cars. I think you'll have a hard time thinking of ways to persuade people to swap their cars for a crowded bus or underground train. They're convenient, comfortable, faster, and sometimes they're a status symbol too.
Okay, I agree that cars will probably always be the most popular means of transport, but there are ways to cut down the number of people who bring their cars into the city. It's a problem that affects every big city, and several methods have been tried.
I know, as I've found to my cost. When I go into London, which I do 2 or 3 times a week, I have to pay £5 to get into the city centre. Has your research thrown up any more places where they do this?
Oh, yes. Apart from London, there's Oslo, Stockholm, Singapore. Now, there, in Singapore, they've got it really organized. They've imposed a tax on all roads leading into the city center, and they have electronic sensors that identify each car, and then debit a credit card belonging to the owner.
Before you hear the rest of the conversation, you have some time to look at questions 26 to 30. Now listen and answer questions 26 to 30.
And other cities, instead of charging motorists to come into the city center, have tried other measures.
Such as?
Well, in Athens, cars are only allowed to go into the city center on alternate days, depending on their license plate number. In Bogota and some other Latin American cities, such as Quito and Sao Paulo, they've developed what is called a BRT system.
A what?
A BRT system, a bus rapid transit system. People leave their cars outside the city and take buses, which have special express lanes into and through the city. It's been so successful that they're trying it out in Mexico City, Beijing, Seoul, and Taipei. And other cities are pedestrianizing more and more areas of the city center.
I see. How have these measures affected traffic congestion and pollution levels?
In most cases, it has led to a reduction in the number of cars entering the city center. Certainly in Singapore, where it's now much easier to move around the city and the air is much cleaner than most other cities in that part of the world. London too, I believe. I can give some facts and figures if you like.
Please do.
In the first year after the tax was introduced, the number of people using buses to get to the city center rose by 38%.
Really? 38%? Incredible!
Yes, and the number of cars entering central London dropped by about 18%. There's more. The number of people using bicycles and mopeds went up 17%.
I knew we'd get to bicycles at some point.
Well, yes. In the city, the bicycle has a lot going for it. You can avoid traffic jams, there are no parking problems, they don't pollute, they're cheap to run, and they don't cost very much. Oh, and here's another fact for you. You can fit 20 bicycles in the space needed to park one car.
Well, I never. But I can't see it catching on. Besides, we seem to be getting off the point.
Not at all. China, Japan, and Holland have all integrated bicycles into their urban transport systems. In Holland and Japan, they've got special parking areas for commuters who get to the station by bike. And Japan has even built multi-story parking facilities for bikes close to railway stations. Then look at America. In New York, delivery services use bicycles because they can deliver messages and small parcels far more quickly and at much lower cost than cars or vans. Even the police use bicycles. In fact, in about 80% of the towns in America where the population is around 500,000, the police regularly patrol on bicycles. And they have proved to be effective because they can reach the scene of an accident or crime faster and more quietly than officers in patrol cars, making a lot more arrests per officer.
Well, you do know your bicycles, don't you? But I do need to hear more about the public transport system and what's to be done about that. And I'd like you to look a bit more into the economics of it, how much it will cost to improve the situation, and so on. Okay? Right. See you next Tuesday.
Yes, next Tuesday. Bye, Mr. Taylor.
That is the end of section 3. You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Now turns to Part 4. Part 4.
You will hear a biology lecture about tuberlaria. You have 30 seconds to look at questions 31 to 33.
Listen carefully and answer questions 31
to 33.
Hello, everyone. I'm glad so many people have shown up here today to hear about these fascinating little creatures called the turbolaria. My name is Dr. Baker, and I've spent 20 years researching thousands of different species of platyhelminths, what are commonly known as flatworms, both free-living and parasitic. So there are a lot of things I could tell you about these extremely interesting invertebrate, but I will try to keep it short. Turbolaria are unique amongst flatworms in 3 ways. The first one is that, unlike 80% of all platyhelminths, turbolaria do not need to secure nourishment from a living source. This means that they do not generally parasitize a host, but are instead found living freely in the environment. So, no need to worry about any of these little samples I've got here escaping and causing havoc. The second way in which they're different is that they are, well, they're incredibly simple. And by simple, I don't mean in terms of structure, as their structure is indeed quite complex, and I'll get to that later. By simple, I mean that they're not the brightest bulbs in the box. Flatworms in general are not known for their cognitive abilities, especially when compared with other invertebrates such as cuttlefish or octopuses or even insects. But amongst flatworms, turbolaria are by far the most primitive of the bunch. Finally, and this is a direct result of the first thing I mentioned, turbolaria tend to have a much more complicated sensory system in their head region. This includes a set of eyes with receptors that can detect light, as well as chemical sensory organs that assist Turbularia in locating food. Obviously, as other flatworms receive nutrition directly from their host, they have no need for this.
You now have 30 seconds to look at questions 34 to 40.
Now listen carefully and answer questions
34 to 40.
Despite these three differences, however, Turbularia are quite similar to other flatworms in all sorts of other ways. First of all, as their name suggests, they're incredibly flat, which allows them to hide under stones. They're symmetrical on both sides, and they don't have a body cavity. They also don't have any specialized respiratory, skeletal, and circulatory systems. What they do have, however, and this is what I meant when I referenced their structure before, is three layers known as the endoderm, the mesoderm, and the ectoderm, as well as a head region where their brain and sense organs are located, and a spongy connective tissue that fills all the space between their organs. Finally, like most species of flatworms, they're hermaphrodites. This means that a single flatworm has a set of each gender. But don't take this to mean they reproduce alone. Their preferred method of reproduction is called cross-fertilization, which means that each flatworm fertilizes the other. I mentioned before that most flatworms need a host, but Turbularia feed from the environment. So what do they feed on? Most Turbularia can be found either in fresh or salt water, and they feed on small insects, microscopic matter, and crustaceans. They will pretty much eat anything they find. They have no preference on whether their food is living or dead. Also, and this is the most remarkable part about their eating habits, if they ever find themselves in a situation where food is scarce, they might also feed on themselves. That's right, they'll start eating their own body, starting with the least essential muscles and organs and working their way up. They will shrink in size until they're able to find food again, at which point they'll begin to regenerate everything they've lost. One final thing about food, and apologies in advance if I disgust you, Turbularia don't possess an anus, which means that their mouth, which is a muscular opening on the underside of their body, has to serve as one. Before I finish this presentation, one more thing you've probably heard before but weren't sure if it was a myth or not. I mentioned already that Turbularia can reproduce on their own, but there's a second method they can use, which is known as fission. Now, as a child, you were probably told that if you cut a worm in half, it will grow into two new worms. That's not entirely true, but flatworms are not worms exactly, and they do have the ability to regenerate by splitting into two, perhaps even more smaller parts, at which point each part regrows the missing organs and becomes a brand new Turbularian. Now, this is extremely important for us, and this is how I'd like to close this presentation. Because their ability to regenerate endlessly makes them virtually immortal, and it might open pathways to regeneration in human cells or slowing the human aging process, which is why scientists like myself have been studying these unique creatures, hoping to get some answers. Thank you for listening, and please come along to see me and my samples if you have any further questions.
That is the end of section 4. You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Give it to me.